Okay, so good morning. I was thinking this morning when I was walking Bugsy that I've never really talked about the book in detail. I've kind of kept it to myself, a little afraid that people would steal my ideas, and I just decided this morning, you know what, I'm going to talk about it. I have printed the book myself by hand using silkscreen, hand illustrations, and lithograph. This is actually the last edition of it that I printed. I've been doing it over and over and over and over and over again for 13, maybe 14 years. I'm not even sure at this point. Yeah, about 14 years now. I think I started in 2006. And the idea was born because I had to go to therapy for PTSD. I had an event happen several heartbreaking events that left me devastated, and one of them left me almost without the ability to communicate. It was a heartbreaking conversation between my mom and I just couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't take it anymore, and it wrecked me. And then I was in a relationship. My heart was broken, and my business failed. It was just like one thing after another, just everything in life going wrong. I had a boss that was abusing me at work, and that situation just never ends. So I started going to therapy because it was like heartbreaking event after heartbreaking event. And I just happened to, it took me an hour to walk into this therapy office, but I happened to walk in the door where there was a group of therapists, and it was just after hours when I walked in the door, and I met this woman, Nancy. She came out and greeted me. I could barely talk. I could barely look at her. And it turned out she did PTSD therapy. So I ended up with her for several years. I also started going to Al-Anon and AA, because I used to be a heavy drinker. That's in my past now. The compulsion is no longer there. But I went to Al-Anon, which is even more helpful. Al-Anon got to the basis through talking and listening. Al-Anon got to the core of why I was drinking and why relationships kept repeating themselves and are still repeating themselves, unfortunately. I can't say, oh yes, all the abusive bosses, all the abuse ended and people finally listen to me and life is wonderful. It still hasn't ended, but I can see it. I don't know. But I understand it better and where it comes from and why it keeps happening. I don't think that's helpful. But anyway, all of that led me to start developing these book ideas. And right now I think I've got 7-8 books outlined based on all of that. Based on difficult relationships, people that are very complex, or characters that are very complex, and still manage to live together in community using kindness and understanding instead of something that I am somewhat used to. And so I guess it's my dream to live in a community like that where people are respected, or characters are respected. They're treated with respect, they're treated with kindness, they're treated with understanding. So it's kind of my hopeful dream put into this town called Scootertown. And Scootertown is named after, you can see him, I believe, my teddy bear Scooter. This is my teddy bear growing up. He is now 57 years old, like I am, and he sits on my desk. The poor dear is falling to pieces, but I touch him and I feel that sense of warmth and love that I had when I was a kid, and there was no one else around to be my friend. So I know that sounds very sad and drab, But there were times in my life where things were so difficult and dangerous, I felt I had nobody but my teddy bear. So I had Scooter. Scooter is the grandfather in my idea and my stories of Honey Bear, a bear that I sent to my now grandson. He's 16 months old now, and this was the first gift I sent him so he could have a friend. He has great parents, but you need that someone special who is all yours in your life. That something, that someone, that secret friend. And so I'm hoping Honey Bear is his. I also sent him a giraffe, because the giraffe is actually included in one of my adventure books on the characters and stories from Scootertown. So that's what that was all born of, was therapy and Al-Anon and AA. And one of the things I really treasured in my Al-Anon was getting this book, Blueprint for Progress. It is pretty ripped up, but in the self-examination that you have to do in the program and the talk and the listening, there's a character list. And this is something I really treasure, and I look at every time I'm drawing or working on an idea for stories for Scootertown. They're all character traits that we share, and kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly in them, and everything in between. I'll list some traits off. Being aware of others. And then the other side of being aware of others is being self-centered. Being helpful to others. The other side is being self-indulgent. Being generous. Other side, selfish. Thoughtful. Self-pitying. Open-minded and gracious. Smug and stubborn. Constructively critical. Judgmental is the opposing trait. Respectful, disrespectful. Patient, impatient. Tolerant, intolerant. Realistic, unrealistic. Reasonable, unreasonable. Assertive, submissive. Cooperative, domineering. The list goes on. It's a couple more pages, but these are something I go over and over again. So I make sure that my characters, although we've just been doing illustrations of them, I know the intent behind them. And I know their characters fully. Each of them has a backstory. Each of them has experiences that they bring to every situation, just like people. So I'm going to kind of go, I want to show this last printing of the book that I did. We've been working on illustrations online. We've been doing line-by-line drawings of different things that I thought you might find interesting and might want to draw, and you can keep, and you can make into dioramas, or you can use as coloring projects, or teachers could use, therapists could use. They're just, right now we're just working on structures and things. Eventually I would like to share more and more of my story. I mean, this is a project I would like to see published. I would like to work with a publisher, because I have, like I said, 7, 8 different stories for Scootertown that I'd like to work on. I've also got another series about these little hens, and in fact this morning I was writing one about the hens revolt, or the chickens revolt, where this farmer doesn't keep his chickens safe. And there's a wolf or a coyote that comes in, and he just keeps eating them. And there are several chickens that are able to find safe spots to avoid the wolf, but most of them are just laid bare to this wolf. It's basically about management is the story, but instead of making them safe, he just leaves them out in the open to be attacked. So, and he says to his farm hands, well, we can just replace them, we'll get more chickens. So, and eventually the small core, I shouldn't tell the whole story, but eventually the small core group of chickens revolt. And basically, farmer, if you're not going to help us, we'll help ourselves. And they enlist one of the farm hands to help build them a safe space to live. Which at one point enrages the farmer, because he doesn't want to have anyone put the time or the money into building a safe space. He would rather just everyone continue going as is. So, like I said, it's basically an allegory for management, for poor management. But I love the idea of these chickens who, in another story, have tea parties every day. I've also got a book about a cow and an older woman who loved to nap together in the backyard, but one day the cow gets bored and jumps on her trampoline and takes a trip. But anyway, the first story in the series is called Run, Rabbit, Run. This is the one I fully illustrated over and over and over again. Now I feel like it's finally getting to a really beautiful point. My grandson has inspired me to just build something more in depth. So there's the cover, Run, Rabbit, Run. It's about Jimmy, and Jimmy has gone from a little white boy that you see there to being this child. He has brown curly hair. He could be a number of different shades of brown. So because I want him to reflect more people in the world and appeal to more people and have children see themselves in it. So this was the opening cover. It's feathers. I love drawing feathers. Feathers are used in a number of illustrations we've been doing for various reasons. This is one map of the town with a character key. And in that character key we have the old Jimmy, we have Bugsy, who's my dog, Joel, who's an adventurous squirrel who's lived on a ship and everywhere, Dixie, who's a kind of a selfish little bird, but he means well. My turtle was originally named Henry B. for a friend of my son's, and I've renamed him several times. One time I changed his name to Dev, after a friend of mine who passed away, a very generous, giving friend who was very peaceful, and now he's named Max after my grandson. And then we have Jack Rabbit. The inner cover is shows how each of the characters was brought up with love. They're loved and nurtured. We go to the turtle house. No, it's no longer HB, it's Max. This is the turtle house where he spent his early years, and he was shown love. He was brought up with love and caring and kindness and patience. And we switch over to the Harrington house, Jack Harrington, the rabbit. He was brought up in a top hat in a rabbit hutch that's attached to a rabbit hutch, which we made, I guess I put it away, we made this the other night, a 3D version of it. But I pull in with Jack just kind of sitting in a corner of the, or in a space in the top hat. We see all these bunnies leaping around and no one's paying attention to Jack. Jack eventually finds his way out of that little blanket on his own because there's no one there to show him how. No one interacts with him, except for this large finger that comes down and points at him. What I want to convey is an adult just kind of yelling at him and just kind of yelling at him, and Jack doesn't understand why, and eventually the finger just pokes him. In the original idea, this stayed on Jack throughout the entire story, but then I realized it was a little convoluted and took up space and just, I don't know, was redundant. So we've got this finger that he's afraid of, which is seemingly a parent or an adult. And then we go into Jack thinking of being poked too many times and thinking about things, becoming angry, and this adult just throws this hoodie at him and demands that he put it on and wear it. So Jack wears this hoodie all the time, even though he could take it off. He continues to wear it, and what it is frustration, sadness, anger, and abuse. And there's Jack running away, because we have two running away from the situation, because we have two responses to abuse, fight or flight. And Jack just wants it to go away. So he leaves and he builds his own home. In the story, everybody but Jimmy has their own place. I've drawn out 3D versions. We're going to be building the entire village over time. We've done 3 houses so far. But Jack has built his own home. I have part of an illustration of it over there. It's basically a hole in the ground. But because he was never taught anything by an adult or anyone, his house is very messy. It's very, very messy. It's dirty, and eventually, there's one story where Dixie comes to his house and tries to help him. But in the end, nobody can help Jack but Jack. And so he gets upset over Dixie trying to help clean. Dixie is very controlling anyway, so blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to show a little bit more of the story. I know this is going long. We cut over to Jack has just run away. We cut over to Jimmy playing catch with Max. This idea has also changed. I've kind of stripped it down a little bit more. Jimmy is sitting under a tree alone, thinking and reading, and he's reading, and all of a sudden Max comes along. Again, originally HB, Henry Baker, but now Max. They start playing catch. But Jimmy throws the ball, Max misses it, it bounces off into the woods, and Max says, "I'll go get it." So he takes off to get the ball. And all of a sudden Jack comes along. And actually in the newer story, Jack, he's running and not paying attention. You know, he's running in absolute fury and upset and anger, and he's running and he doesn't know where he's going to go. And in the new story, I have illustrations of him tripping over a log, running into what is it? He trips over a rock. There's a couple things that happen, but he trips over a rock, and as his legs are swinging in the air, he hits a beehive. The beehive hits the ground, and as he starts to get up, the beehive breaks open, these bees come out, and Jack is frozen like this, and then the bees start to attack him, so he has to take off again, and when he takes off, he runs into a tree. And it's all illustrated kind of like a Bugs Bunny cartoon. But eventually he loses the bees, and he's like at the tree. He gets up, and he's really angry, and he comes across Jimmy. And Jimmy is friendly and happy and outgoing. And all of these stories actually are happening in Jimmy's imagination. Everything begins with Jimmy. All the stories, all the ideas, all the characters begin with Jimmy in his living room, because he's a single child, or whatever, an only child, and he has to find ways to entertain himself. So Jack comes along, and he growls at Jimmy, and Jimmy's like, "Meh, whatever," turns around to look for Max, and that infuriates Jack even more, and he picks a fight with Jimmy, and he gets more and more furious and ends up beating up Jimmy. He ends up punching him, which I know is very violent, but it happens. And at some point, he kicks Jimmy. Jimmy flies across, goes through the air, falls down, and bam. Jimmy's on the ground. Jack takes off because he realizes he's done something really horrible. He attacked someone who didn't deserve it. So he runs off, and he thinks about things, and then he bursts into tears because he's taken an anger out on someone else. Anyway, other animals come along. They comfort Jimmy. They try and help Jimmy. Here's Bugsy, because Bugsy is pretty benign. He's just like a goofball and silly, and he's deeply inappropriate sometimes, but he's rolling all over Jimmy, and he's playing with Joel, and eventually Max comes back to the scene. Max bumps into Dixie while he's trying to find the ball, and Dixie is a little bird who wears roller skates when he's flying. And they're chit-chatting and laughing and everything, and they look over, and there's Jimmy on the ground. And Max says to Dixie, "I wonder what's wrong." And they both come over, and they start talking to Jimmy, who explains what happened. So Max stays, and he's talking with Jimmy, and Dixie takes off, and we don't know where he's headed. but he's actually off to find Jack, because in all of this they are friends and they are part of a community. So we need to find out what really happened to help everybody involved. And I know this is very long, but I thought it would be important to explain. So they talk and talk. They talk and talk, and then Max says, I have a way to make you feel better. Let me show you how. This is what I do. And so they sit down together, like in a meditative pose, but without saying it. And Max says, this is how I deal with things. I get very quiet. I go inside my turtle shell. Well, I go inside my turtle shell. I take some deep breaths, and I think about love. And Jimmy's never done this before. He doesn't know how. So Max has to teach him how. And there's Jack just off, confused and angry and upset and not knowing what to do. So Jimmy learns to take a deep breath, and let it go. And then his heart is full. And I kind of don't like the way I illustrated this. I think it's just too basic, but I wanted to show his heart was full. What irritates me now are the words around it, but I think maybe it might be helpful. I'm not sure. I'm not stuck on this. Love, understanding, clarity, safety, calm, being, joy, courage, ease. Yeah, I think it's a little basic, but it's okay. So then they go back to play, because Jimmy was able to center himself. And it kind of goes on where they're playing with other characters. And Dixie's looking for Jack. Jack is running. In this book, I had Jack coming back to the scene, but I think I'm going to remove this. Jack coming back to the scene to attack Jimmy one more time because he feels he's right to attack Jimmy, and he wants to prove it to himself. Jack wants to prove it to himself that he's right to attack Jimmy and be right. Attack Jimmy. Just wants to feel, I've got control and I am right. And instead, Jimmy goes through his breathing techniques, which frustrates Jack, but he goes through his breathing techniques and ends up walking away, which upsets Jack. He takes off. Dixie's been looking for him and spies him, running. Follows him to his house, but grabs a basket of flowers. There's Jack hopping into his house, which is a hole in the ground like all rabbits have. Dixie brings him a basket of flowers with a tag that says, "To my friend, thinking of you." So that Jack knows he's not the enemy. He's actually someone who's taken into consideration with love. Dixie looks down into the rabbit hole and calls out for Jack. Calls out for Jack, who's down there. He's very upset and he's crying. Dixie doesn't give up. And Jack eventually climbs up out of his hole. And Dixie says, I'll listen. So Jack sits outside with Dixie in the basket of flowers, and it says, it will all be okay. In all my videos, I tend to say that. It'll be okay. It'll be okay. When we're drawing and I kind of mess up, it'll be okay. So I did write a copyright message in this and more feathers in the back. But that's the first book I've fully illustrated. And like I said, now I've been re-illustrating it. Now we're doing it on camera, and I'm doing it with you. But that's the first book. I've also got, like I said, 7 other books. I've got King of the Pickles, which is about Jack trying to come to have order in his home, which I said is very, very messy. It's basically a hoarder's home, because he finds safety in having stuff and trying to keep order. And at one point he lines up his pickles because he's king of the pickles, and he loves pickles. Jimmy, when he's dreaming up this story, has a plate full of pickles because he loves pickles, which then goes to Jack. One book is May Day Every Day, or Potluck Extravaganza, which is Dixie putting together a picnic in the middle of town, and it becomes him not just inviting people to the picnic, but telling them what they're going to make. And he gives them orders. This is what you're going to make. And Joel gets his, and he goes, I'm a squirrel. I don't eat meatloaf. So it's about rectifying that situation. Dixie coming to the realization that you can't control everybody. I'm trying to remember. I have so many little stories. Memories is another book. And it's how each character got to where they are, where their parents are, or where their parent or family is. I don't say it outright, I just do illustrations of them, like Jack has a picture of his parents in the background, and a framed front page news story that says squirrels hit by car. Bugsy and he share a similar background where his parents are gone. Everybody shares a background where they're children, they're little, they would be children, maybe anywhere between 8 and 12, or 6 and 12, or 4 and 12, but they are parentless, so they build this community. I don't really want to explain Dixie's situation, like in the illustrations. Max's family is nearby, so he hasn't really lost them. I think sounds like a landscaper is here. So I may have to cut it short. The Best of Friends in Scootertown, it's all about what they share and what they do together and using their imaginations. And that's where the giraffe comes in. Or no, maybe that is another book. Sorry. This is all about what they share. Joel and Dixie share a love of cooking with style. Dixie and Joel love strategy board games. That's one thing they share. Bugsy and Joel share physical games. They love chasing each other and making up reasons, like tag or flag, those kind of physical games. Jimmy and Max, they share imagination and building things, using what they have to build things. There's another story. Just adventuring. Funning and adventuring is what I wanted to call it originally. It's about them having the imagination to hop on like a giraffe and run around in this fictitious desert somewhere, which would just be silly, but it's fun. It's just what kids do. And I have several stories in there, like 7 different stories I outlined. And I would love to illustrate, but I just have to find a publisher or someone willing to work with me. I've been doing these as wordless books. Number 1, I'm not really a writer. Number 2, I've been doing this with the idea of parents, teachers, and therapists in mind, and librarians. This could be used as a teaching tool, how to write, letting children or adults who have suffered PTSD or whatever, it doesn't even have to be that extreme, but people who have been in these situations writing their own story, writing their own words to the pictures. I think it could be a really good teaching tool. I have sent this out to several publishers. I've gotten great rejection letters, so I'm just going to post this online and see what happens. But in the meantime, just keep drawing along with me if you would, and share the videos of us drawing. Share them with a teacher or a therapist. I'd really like to start making more connections. All right? That's it. Stories from Scootertown. Ciao.